final stages of the heresy, as the ruin storm began to abate, Horus threw his might into the ongoing war in the strategically vital beta-garmon star cluster. His presence heralded a swathe of victories for the Traitors, opening the doors to the Sol system. However, the isolated planet of Alpha-Garmon 9, a stronghold of the Mechanicum, was an exception.
This planet was essentially a massive solar farm that harnessed the energies of Alpha-Garmon's red giant star. The world's black sands were lined in thousands of kilometers of gigantic Tesla coils that gathered solar energy and transferred it to energy cores and solar vaults for export. Each of these networks was known as a heliocroft, and were worked by the planet's population who dwelt in the nearby conurbations.
The Imperial forces of the Legio Astorum and Legio Defensa, supported by knightly houses, including our House Hermetica, managed to hold the line against the traitorous Legio Traitors and their allies in House Caesarian during this apocalyptic period. This report concerns the actions of the von Heur household and the fate of Lord Del Conte von Heur. After a stinging defeat on the Solaris plain, the Loyalist forces were in retreat. At the very forefront of the vanguard in pursuit were elements of both Legio Kratos and House Caesarian. The Godbreaker's disposition was a pair of warhound titans, Belus and Aganor, who were accompanied by a detachment of Knight Lancers belonging to House Caesarian. Covering the Loyalist retreat were members of House Hermetica, led by Lord Del Conte von Heur, his immediate household, and an auxiliary detachment of Knight Paladins. This mission represents the infamous skirmish at Heliocroft Conurb 7, one of the tussles that took place between the Loyalists attempting to defend the planet and the rampaging traitor forces of the Godbreakers and their allies. Following a stinging defeat for the Loyalists at the plains near the solar vault sprawl of Gamma 0100111011, the surviving Titans of the Warp Runners and Nova Guard moved to fall back to the Manufactorum complexes surrounding the sacred stupa to the Omnissiah near Heliocroft Conurb 7. In order to cover the retreat, many valiant lords and knights of the House Hermetica volunteered to impede the traitors' pursuit, even though it was largely perceived as being a suicide mission. This was a custom skirmish game played on a 2-foot by 4-foot board, packed with a high density of buildings to represent the conurbation. The objective markers were not in use in this scenario. The battle length was set to 6 rounds, after which the Loyalists would make their escape. If all the units of either side were destroyed at any point before this, the battle would end immediately. Both forces had 9 potential victory points that could be achieved. Additionally, the traitor forces would also receive 6 victory points if they killed all of the Loyalists before the end of turn 6. Likewise, the Loyalists would receive 6 victory points if any survived to the end of the game unbroken. The side that accrued the most victory points would be the victor. The Loyalists chose their battle edge and deployed their entire force 40 centimeters from the center of the battlefield. The traitors then did the same on the opposite side. The Loyalist knights from House Hermetica spread out their forces to cover the entire deployment zone, so as to not present any gaps that could be exploited by the Traitors. The Traitors deployed their lancers from House Caesarian on their right flank, whilst their two Warhound Titans, Belus and Agonor, were deployed on their left, in close proximity to each other. Despite the fact that the Warhounds are Titans, they are relatively fragile and work best in pairs. As usual, both commanders gave orders to each of their units in secret before determining who had the initiative. Both players rolled off, and the Loyalists took the initiative. It was then time to reveal what orders each unit had been given. Both the Traitor Lancer detachment of House Caesarian and both the Warhounds had received advance orders. All the units on the Loyalist side went on the charge, eager to engage with the forces of the enemy. As the Loyalists had taken the initiative, they forced the Traitors to move first. The two Warhound Titans flanked the building directly ahead of them, creating a pair of corridors of fire. The Lancers did the same, also creating a wall of potential shooting against the Loyalists. The entire Loyalist side moved as far forward as they could, which was a whopping 40 centimeters on the charge, but were careful to remain out of line of sight. As all of the combatants were neither in close combat nor did they have LOS to any of their enemies, this phase passed without incident. The first end phase also passed without incident, meaning both sides had achieved 0 victory points. Once more, each unit received their orders and the two players rolled off for initiative, with the traitor player gaining the advantage. Each unit then revealed its orders. The Lancers went on to charge, desperate to bring their power lances to bear. Both of the Warhounds went on to first fire orders as they readied themselves to be charged. On the Loyalist side, the detachment of Paladins on their right flank prepared to charge the Warhounds, as did Lord Del Conte von Heur. The Knight Paladin detachment in the centre also went on charge orders to try and get around the rear of the Warhounds ahead of them. On their left flank, the Auxiliary Paladin detachment received advanced orders in the hope that they could outmaneuver the Lancers ahead and bring their own weapons to bear. The traitor player then opted to move first. The two Warhound Titans kept their initial facing towards the enemy board edge. He then used the fantastic movement of the Lancers, 50 centimeters on the charge, to outpace and charge the Loyalist Auxiliary Knight detachment before they could even reposition themselves to prepare for the attack. In response, the two remaining unengaged Knight Paladin detachments raced forwards, with the centrally placed detachment moving towards the rear arc of the Warhound Aganor, whilst Lord Del Conte von Heur charged it from the front to keep it in place. The detachment on the far right flank circumvented the nearby building to crash into the rear of the Warhound Belus, although only one of the knights reached their target. The combat phase began with the first fire segment. Unfortunately, the Warhound Belus had no targets in his fire arc, but its brother Warhound Aganor most certainly did. It poured fire into the charging Night Lord with its Vulcan Megabolter and Turbo Laser Destructor, with a combined 10 shots. The Lord von Heur had clearly been hoping his power field was going to protect him from the incoming fire, and it did to some extent. But it was not enough, and he went down in a deluge of fire. In the close combat phase, the Lancers were able to use their power lances before combat began, and these pierced the rear armor of two of the Paladins, killing them outright. The remaining combat was a quick and bloody affair, with the fearsome Paladin neatly cutting down the attacking Lancer. However, the Paladins were broken, but they did pass their morale check. On the other side of the board, the single Paladin that had reached the Warhound Belus hacked at the larger Titan with its chainsword and shock lance and caused serious damage to its left leg, halving its movement. The second end phase again passed without incident. However, the Traitor side had 3 victory points to the Loyalists 2 for breaking the auxiliary Knight Paladin detachment. All units received their orders, and once again, the Traitors took the initiative. In the centre of the board, the Lancers of House Caesarium went on to charge orders, whilst the lone survivor of their assault went on to first fire, hoping that the opportunity to pivot and face his aggressors would precipitate. Likewise, the undamaged Warhound Aganor too went on to first fire orders, and the nearby Paladins were given the charge order. The Paladins on the far flank that had pinned Belus remained on charge orders, so as to bring the remaining 2 knights to bear on the crippled Titan, with the Warhound itself remaining on first fire orders. The Traitors opted to move first, and one of the Lancers crashed into the rear of the Paladin before he could turn to face them. It is worth noting that unless fighting a gargantuan enemy, Knights lose their close assault factor bonus on the charge if they end up fighting in a multiple combat. This is due to the risk of the lance discharging into their allies, which is why only a single knight engaged the Paladin. Both Aganor and Belus then turned to face the incoming knights. Titans are only pinned by other super heavy vehicles. With the traitor movement finished, it was the Loyalists' turn. The Warhound Belus soon found himself facing 3 Knight Paladins, as did Aganor. However, both would still be able to shoot in the first fire phase. In the first fire segment, Belus's Plasma Blast Gun and Vulcan Heavy Bolter deleted the entire Knight detachment, breaking the household. Aganor was not as successful as his brother Titan, and was only able to kill a single opposing knight. In the close combat phase, the charging Lancer's power lance ripped through the Paladin's armor and killed the last of the auxiliaries. The last 2 surviving Paladins swung Aganor with one damaging its head and the other targeting its legs, causing enough damage so that the Titan could no longer walk. The Warhound fought back, but inflicted no damage on the two attacking knights. In the end phase, with the breaking of the Knight Paladin household, the Traitors now went up to 9 victory points. All the surviving units received their orders, and the Loyalists took the initiative. The Warhound Belus went on to charge orders, eager for more Loyalists to kill. His brother Warhound Aganor went on to first fire, as did the 2 remaining loyal Knight Paladins. The 2 Lancers on the other side of the table received charge orders, and engaged their power lances. The Lancers completed a massive charge across the table against the last 2 Loyalist Knights, as did the Warhound Belus. In the first fire segment, both Loyalist Knights shot their battle cannons and bolters at the Warhound in front of them. Most of the shots failed to damage the Warhound, however, a single burst of bolter fire aimed at the already damaged legs blew them apart and caused the engine to topple over in front of the nearby building. In the close combat segment, the Lancers' power lances struck both Knight Paladins in their rear armour and easily destroyed them, wiping the battlefield clean of Loyalists and earning the Traitors an additional 6 victory points. The game was a solid win for the Traitors, who had scored 15 victory points. With the destruction of the Warhound Titan, the Loyalists had at least been able to claw back some points and a modicum of respect. However, the Traitors were now free to continue their pursuit of the retreating Loyalist forces.